Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order and welcome everyone here. This meeting is called by the committee to review and report on the public accounts of Canada, and this is a 3-volume report detailing all revenues, expenses, taxes, transfers to persons, transfers to other levels of government for the fiscal period April 1, 08 to and including March 31st, 09. This might not be the most exciting meeting of the committee, but in my view, it is probably the most important meeting that the committee holds each year. It is the final stage of the financial accountability process of government. It starts with the budget that the Minister of Finance tables each spring, which sets out the government's financial plans for the upcoming year. That is followed by the estimates process of business and supply, where the actual monies are appropriated by Parliament, and then, of course, we have the public accounts, which are prepared by the government but are audited by the Auditor General, and they're tabled in Parliament, and then the cycle is completed. So I want to welcome our witnesses, and the committee is very pleased to have with us today. First of all, from the Office of the Auditor General of Canada, we have the Auditor, Sheila Fraser. She's accompanied by Assistant Auditor Nancy Cheng. We have from the Department of Finance, Paul Rochon, a Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Economic and Policy Branch. And we have from the Treasury Board Secretariat, Mr. James Ralston, a Comptroller General of Canada. Mr. Ralston, first of all, I want to congratulate you on your new appointment. This, I understand, is your first appearance before the committee, and welcome to the committee. He's accompanied by Bill Matthews, the Assistant Comptroller General. Bill's been here many times before, and Susie Gignac, the Executive Director, Government Accounting Policy and Reporting, Financial Management and Analysis Sector. So welcome to each and every one of you. We're going to start with opening remarks. I understand, Ms. Fraser, you have a 5-minute opening remark, and Mr. Ralston, you have a 5-minute opening remark. And I understand that the Department of Finance does not have an opening remark now. So I turn the floor over to you, Ms. Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. We thank you for the opportunity to present our audit report on the 2008-09 financial statements of the Government of Canada. As you mentioned, I'm accompanied by Nancy Cheng, Assistant Auditor General, who is responsible for the audit of these financial statements. We are pleased to see that the committee is holding this hearing on the Public Accounts of Canada, a key accountability report of the government. The Comptroller General will be explaining to the committee the main points in the government's financial statements, and I will focus on the highlights of our audit opinion and observations. Mon rapport sur les états financiers de 2008-2009.
The Auditor General's report on the 2008-2009 financial statements is included on page 2.4 of Volume 1 of the Public Accounts. The opinion provides Parliament with the assurance that the government's financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with the government's stated accounting policies, which conform with Canadian generally accepted accounting principles. It can be referred to as a clean opinion. Our office has been able to issue such an opinion in each of the past 11 years. We commend the government for producing financial statements that are presented fairly in conformity with Canadian generally accepted accounting principles. In our view, Canada continues to demonstrate leadership in financial reporting for national governments. I would now like to discuss several issues that we have presented in our observations.
Economic downturn, the government announced a number of stimulus actions in its fiscal update and economic action plan. We observe that the majority of the stimulus activities and actions will take place in the 2009-10 fiscal year. Our audit next year will focus on the accounting of these transactions to ensure they are properly presented in the government's financial statements. As described in Note 17 to the summary financial statements, most of the stimulus spending will take place in 2009-10 and 2010-11. For the 2008-9 audit, we reviewed the government's accounting and disclosure of initiatives it undertook during the year in response to the downturn. We concluded that the government's accounting and presentation are appropriate and that its commitments are adequately disclosed. As well, I am pleased to note that Volume 1, Section 1 of the Public Accounts includes a discussion about the economic stimulus commitments made during the fiscal year, such as investment in infrastructure spending. In our observations, We again raised the question of accrual-based budgeting and appropriations by departments and agencies. As we have noted in the past, the government has yet to commit to a date for adopting accrual appropriations or explain why it would not be prudent to do so. Nous sommes heureux de signaler que nous avons délivré une opinion sans réserve sur les...
We are also pleased to report that we have issued an unqualified opinion on the Department of Justice's financial statements, the first audit opinion for Department of Financial Statements. In addition, during the fall of 2009, my office will undertake a review of the readiness of Industry Canada for a controls-reliant approach to the audit of their financial statements. More details and several other matters are discussed in our observations. They also include an update on issues raised in previous years. These observations can be found on page 2.34 and 2.39 of Volume 1 of the Public Accounts. In conclusion, we would like very much to thank the staff of the Office of the Comptroller General and those in all of the departments involved. These accounts reflect many hours of painstaking work.
Statement, and we would be pleased to answer any questions that committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fraser. Now, we're now going to hear from the Comptroller General, Mr. James Ralston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good day to you and members of the committee. Je vous remercie de m'avoir invité à me présenter.
Thank you very much for the invitation to appear before this committee to discuss the Public Accounts of Canada. I am pleased to be here in my role as Comptroller General of Canada.
Mr. Bill Matthews, Assistant Comptroller General, Financial Management and Analysis Sector, and Ms. Susie Gignac, Executive Director, Government Accounting Policy and Reporting. For the
11th consecutive year, the Auditor General has issued an unqualified opinion on the government's financial statements. This testifies to the high standards of the government's financial statements and reporting.
Office for the continued professional working relationship that we have enjoyed. Monsieur le Président, nous avons déposé une...
Mr. Chair, we have tabled a slide presentation outlining some of the key financial results for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2009. We can go through the presentation, or if you would prefer, we can simply table the presentation and go straight to questions from the committee.
I don't know, Mr. Ralston. I think I've gone over your slide presentation. I think it's pretty well self-explanatory. I don't think we need to go over it, and we can just go right to committees unless anyone wants to. If anyone wants to hear further, they can ask you specific questions. And
Certainly.
But the slide presentations does, in a summary form, present the major changes in the financial position of the government from the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2009 to the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2008. So, having said that, we're going to go to the first round of questions. But before I do that, I just want to remind members, if they're putting a question to any of the witnesses on these specific public accounts, if you could refer to the actual page, because the same page in the French documents may not be the same page in the English documents. So having said that, I'm going to go to the first round. It's 8 minutes. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think I should also commend the whole chain of command who have participated in the production of these public accounts. It's a massive undertaking, and it's got the seal of approval of the Auditor General, and I think that's tremendous. Now, having said that, it's 2 or 3 inches thick of documents that details the expenditure of over a couple $100 billion, and so there's a lot of territory. I'm going to focus on, well, this, of course, the fiscal year we're talking about ended over a half year ago, and so I note as a highlight, before I ask my questions, that the government managed to walk us into a deficit before the recession really started to bite. But I could say that it's only $5 or $6 billion, but it's still a deficit which may have been unexpected to by some Canadians, by a lot of Canadians. In any event, one of the highlights of this, from my point of view, is the extent, the quantity of the lapsing, the money not spent in the fiscal year when it had been planned to spend the money. And the amount of lapsing is in the billions, maybe $6 billion, $5, $6, $7 billion, as I and my researchers have added it up. And I'm puzzled by that. I know that lapsing happens, and for a number of reasons, administrative. I suppose when you're spending $230 some odd billion, you can have a hiccup, and you don't get the money out the front door. But some of the lapsing that's here is in relation to programming that I would have thought the government and Canadians wanted spent, wanted out there. So, and I'm going to direct my question to the Comptroller General, and he may not feel equipped to answer it, but I'm wondering if there is any kind of a pattern visible here of lapsing. For example, the language instructions for newcomers under citizenship, a 32% lapse of about $82 million. Apprenticeship incentive grant at HRSDC of 46%, about $45 million. An accessibility, enabling accessibility fund. This is for Canadians who need accessibility. There was a lapse there of 100%. The full $21 million of the program was not spent. The government talks the talk on crime agenda, and yet when it comes to crime prevention, the crime prevention budget of $46 million left $12 million unspent. Grants in support of safer communities was 87% lapsed, with $5 or $6 million unspent. And so, can I ask the Comptroller General if he had noted either an increase or decrease in the incidence of lapsing and what may be causing it? When some of this programming is important. The stuff I just read through is important to a lot of Canadians, and if anything, ought to be torqued, but surely not lapsed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as you noted, essentially the appropriation sets out an upper limit to spending and directs some general purposes to which the spending is meant to apply, and typically I think the government does a fairly good job of planning to spend that money, but from time to time, as you noted, their lapses do occur. My experience has been certainly when I was in a department that the lapse kind of rarely, the explanations were rarely the same from year to year. Many different things can go into causing a lapse, and it's very important to study the components of the lapse. You noted many different departments, and I'm sure there are many different explanations for each of those cases. And I must confess that I'm not familiar with what the stories are in each of those instances. Sure. But just to say that we do expect departments to try and plan and do the very best they can to make good use of the monies appropriated by Parliament.
Well, sure they do. They come to Parliament a half year before they come for the estimates, and then we go through the estimates and we authorize the spending, and then we go through the whole fiscal year. So there's lots of notice here. But if you're saying you haven't noticed a particular pattern, the lapse rate on a percentage basis appears to be about 3%. And you could say when when you're spending $230 billion, who's going to miss 6? But I'm concerned that programming that Parliament approves, programming that we've approved, funding for programming we've approved and we expect should be out there, is lapsing. It's not getting done. So is it ineptitude? Is it unforeseen events? Is it, we're getting shortchanged in terms of programming for sure. And I'm in opposition, so I'll certainly be looking for some kind of a cynical bait and switch where, the minister can announce the great program. We have $30 million for this great program, but actually isn't going to spend it. And it's going to lapse, and it gets shifted somewhere else, or it pays down the debt. So you haven't seen it now. I don't know, someone from finance, you're not going to admit to any kind of a pattern here.
Well, the lapse...
Monsieur Rochon, are you? Do you see a pattern lapsing?
There is a pattern in lapses to the, if one goes back, say, to the late 1990s, there was a pattern of increasing lapses from about 1999-2000 until 2007-8 of increasing lapses, and that's, I would say, largely a function of, an expansion of spending over that period of time, and spending that takes some time to implement, either in an absolute sense, because they're federal programs that are being designed, or because they involve some partnership or negotiation with a third party, in particular provinces and municipalities. In terms of the lapse this year, it is down by somewhat over $1 billion compared to last year in aggregate. And it is something that the Treasury Board Secretariat, not the Controller General, but that the Secretariat is looking at when they prepare the estimates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. We're going to now go to Madam Pye. Madam Pye, with minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci.
Thank you. I've just spent 2 weeks reading through these volumes. I'd like to correct my colleague. It's not 3 inches, but probably 8 inches of material. And I think that the auditor knows that last week we did have a study on intellectual property, the management of intellectual property. And the Auditor General pointed out poor management on the part of the government of these innovations. A question was put to the committee. I don't know whether you've been able to read the committee blues, but the question was asked about how much it cost the federal government, how much this poor management cost. And very often, people have to take legal steps in order to have intellectual property protected. I'm interested in knowing whether you have paid any particular attention to this issue and how much it has cost the federal government. The question was referred to you by various witnesses, including the Deputy Minister of the Treasury Board.
Respond.
Merci pour la question. Oui, j'ai...
Yes, thank you for your question. I did, in fact, read the committee's report.
We know we have a little bit of research to do, but do the public accounts contain information that will point you to the amount of money that was lost through that process? Absolutely not. This is an accounting of how the government spent its money. But we recognize there's some work to do in that file. But the meeting was just last week, so we haven't had the time to do any great amount of research on that front.
OK. Donc, vous pourriez faire une petite recherche.
So you can give me a general idea of how much this has cost the government following investigation, can you?
I think we're going to start by looking at our policies in place and making sure we support the process properly. Where we get into information on losses in the public accounts, where there's actually a loss due to damage, fraud, that will be reported. But when you're looking at what someone spent to protect intellectual property, I'm not convinced that our systems properly capture that information. So I'm not sure we'll be able to get back to you, but we have to do some investigation.
OK. Vous me reviendrez. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. I have a question relating to the employment insurance account. On 31st of March of 2009, the surplus, the accumulated surplus was $57 billion, an increase of over $200 million during the course of the year. How would the account, how has it been affected by the recession in your view, and what are the premiums that are expected? The recession will have a huge impact on the account. It is expected that there will be cumulative deficits between 2009 and 2011 of approximately $15 billion. I don't have exact figures, but it will be approximately this amount over that period. The benefits were set in 2009 at $1.73 for every $100 of taxable revenue in the account, and the government has frozen the benefit rate for 2010, and starting in 2011, the system set out in the 2008 budget will in fact come into play. Namely, the benefit rate will increase so that the total account, the cumulative account, will be balanced over a period of 5 years. Thank you. The government refers to steady growth in spending in professional and special services. Do you believe that these expenses are justified, and what steps can the government take to reduce this spending? Same thing for purchase of equipment and tools. What can the government do to reduce its spending on this?
To basically an input. I think it's fair to say that the general approach to budgeting and to resource allocation in the government is focused on the programs to make sure that spending is on for appropriate purposes and towards useful ends. Whether or not the choice of particular business inputs, whether it's professional services or whether it's staff or anything else for that matter, is really a program decision that the deputy ministers, the departments involved would have to make. It's their judgment in terms of what combination of business inputs will best deliver the programs.
Merci. La raison pourquoi je posais certaines questions.
The reason I've been asking some of my questions is last year I focused on the losses undergone by the state, loss of equipment, BlackBerries, laptops, USB keys. In the answers that were given to the committee this morning, we were told that improvements have been made to various control systems within the government. There are also a number of other expenditures that the government is required to undertake in order to make up for mistakes made by officials. There's an article written by Elizabeth Thompson in the newspaper, a fairly long list of problems that have been noted. For example, the loss of gold and other examples, the amount of money, for example, that the government has had to pay, $300,000 that was given to a particular firm to carry out analysis. Have you made any suggestions that changes be made to the practices in certain departments for better controls?
I think central to your question was your observations on the reporting of losses. And what I'd like to just say about that is We see each year there is a certain level of loss reported occurs in government. It again, a variety of reasons. Some of them accidental, some of them maybe due to other circumstances. Once again, my view is that it would obviously be much better if we could reduce that sort of loss. But frankly, I think the best way to approach it, because of the diversity of the circumstances, is that when a loss occurs, the department that experiences it has to look at the situation that caused it, try to address those causes, and put in appropriate fixes for it. Once again, it's just something that, due to the diversity and breadth of government, it's hard to prescribe a single answer. It really requires analysis of the details.
Merci, Madame Bai. Mr. Christopherson, 8 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you all for your attendance today. I want to begin by just underscoring the last sentence in paragraph 4 of the Auditor General's comments. And I'm quoting, in our view, Canada continues to demonstrate leadership in financial reporting for national governments, end quote. I'm one of the quickest and loudest to jump when things aren't the way they should be. And I think it's important to acknowledge how blessed we are in Canada, especially those of us that have an opportunity to travel to other countries and see the corruption they're faced with, not only at senior government levels, but right through their entire society. And it's so frustrating and demoralizing and difficult for ordinary citizens and those kind of corrupt systems, and we have our challenges and we have our problems and we have our corruption, but it's not on that same scale. And so I want to just thank all of you who are involved in that, those that aren't in this room who are involved on the staffing side of giving us that reputation, and hang on tight to this because I'm not going to do it often, but I'll give my due to the Conservative Party while they're in power for ensuring that we've continued, and to the Liberal Party when they were in power. We do have our problems, and we'll continue to face those challenges, but on the broader scheme, when you get out there and see what else exists in the world, we are so blessed in this country. We truly are. And having said that, well, we'll move to some questions. Take some of our challenges on. Volume 3, page 2.20, Public Works and Government Services. Lo and behold, I see the words sponsorship program. I hear scandal, but I read sponsorship program. This is under losses of public money due to an offense, an illegal act or accident. And we all know the millions that was lost, and some of it still never found or identified. But this is now registering in this fiscal year $2.140 million, meaning $2,140,000 lost. Only 32,808 has been recovered so far. 120,000 are expected to be recovered. That leaves $1,987,192 we're not going to get back. Is this the infamous sponsorship program, or is this something new?
Thank you for the question. It is indeed the previous sponsorship program, and the reason you're seeing new losses reported here is sometimes when there's investigations into potential losses, they wait until they've proceeded a certain way down the path before they can actually articulate, do we have a loss or do we not? And it involves court action. So in this case, this was some actions under sponsorship that were pursued this year. There are still losses being calculated. We do annually report on those losses, as well as the new ones, as well as recoveries of the losses previously reported. And in this case, the Department of Public Works Government Services provides additional disclosure. They keep a website up to date on sponsorship recoveries and actions. And in the case we've got here, I'm going from memory, but the reason that is reported as not being recovered is the firm or person in question has declared bankruptcy, and it's just there's a loss there. It's just not felt likely that we will get a recovery.
And just how many more years are Canadians going to continue to see the losses under this sponsorship program? Do you have any idea?
I can't say. It depends. The actions are still before the courts.
But it is going to be ongoing years. We're going to continue to see this.
Say for a couple, yeah.
Volume 1, page 119, pardon me, 11.9. I was looking through, this is by government, it's transfer payment agreement, fixed assets, purchases, and operating leases as at March 31st. That's the column we're in. And in every single province, except one, Mr. Chair, you'll find interesting, that names the government Manitoba, government Ontario, for example, near the bottom of the page. Building Canada Fund, Communities Component. $362 million was the estimated cost, 362 contracted, nothing spent. And I found nothing spent for every province except PEI, which managed to spend $1 million out of the hundreds of millions that's here. Can you tell me why there's so much money being teed up for communities, but it's not being spent when we need it?
Thank you. In this case, you're dealing with the fund. There's negotiations involved between the federal government and the provinces. So when there's the setting aside an amount is the first step. Then there's detailed negotiations that allow you to actually proceed to spending, and those are often time-consuming and delayed. And so it's once those agreements are reached, you'll actually see some spending take place, and it takes some time.
Okay, you know what? Under normal circumstances, I'd probably accept that and move along. But in this case, the government and all the opposition parties and the public and every mayor and every premier has been talking about shovel ready. Get the money out the door. Get the stuff going where you can without doing any damage. Accelerate procedures to get the paperwork going. And I'm led to believe that the only province of all the governments that we have in Canada and all the bureaucrats and politicians, the only province that managed to get something done that actually had money go out the door was little PEI to the tune of $1 million. That's the best this government could do in this kind of crisis?
I can't speak for the department in question, but remember this is as of March 31st. So this is the bulk of the spending under the economic action plan will occur in the current year and next fiscal year. So if you're referring to those projects, this was at March 31st.
Fair enough. I'm not going to be labored. I know that you can only say what you need to say. But I got to tell you, just given the priority and the importance, that if we saw small amounts, I would have thought, I could buy into it. But nothing in every province except PEI, who managed to get $1 million. So all that money, all that talk, and we ended up with $1 million in one province. Something's not right there. Anyway, moving on for as long as my time holds. Volume 3, page 234. Pardon me. 2.34. Oh yeah. This caught my eye. This is under the category again of losses of public property due to accidental destruction or damage. And under transport, the damage to hopper cars, $53 million, 40 million is not going to be recovered. Now, I happened to look over at National Defense, where I expected to see a huge number, and I realize this is accident. Most of their damage, I would assume, is not necessarily by accident. Somebody wanted to do the harm. But still, with all the equipment they're moving around and all the potential for just ordinary human, they don't have a number anywhere near there. In fact, they don't have one line item that breaks $1 million. But hopper cars are costing us a loss of $40 million a year plus. Can you help me understand why?
That one I can, because it caught our eye as well. And in fact, this one is an error on the department's perspective. So what happens here is there's hopper cars leased to CNCP, and if they're damaged, there's kind of a settlement, and the loss has been incorrectly calculated here by the department. So CNCP reimburses the government for a certain amount based on the book value of the hopper car. And hopper cars, because of the nature of their use, are more subject to damage than your average rail car. And in fact, it was not a loss. It was actually a gain of $3 million in terms of the compensation they received. So there were hopper cars damaged during the year, but the amount compensated to the government was actually in excess of its book value. So it was
okay, but it does beg the next question, which is, when did they find that out?
When did they find that out?
Yeah, well, one if I can to the AG, just to close this, Chair, if I can, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
When did they find out they had reported an error?
Yeah.
In the last week when we asked the same question.
And my question to the Auditor General is there not some requirement for department heads to let us know when there's something wrong in the printed document that's especially this big prior to us sitting here and deliberating?
Can I take that?
Somebody.
When we do have errors, which, something this thick, we do from time to time discover errors. There is, once the department finalizes the numbers, we do post an update on the Public Works Government Services Canada website.
But fair enough, a $50 million mistake or $40 million mistake, I just would have expected, given the sophisticated level of all of this, that somebody would have had a note on our desk saying, oh, by the way, on page so-and-so, we really didn't lose $40 million.
And we will do that once we finalize the actual number, but it's...
With great respect, that still doesn't help us for the purposes of this meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Christopherson. Mr. Sexton, 8 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to begin by welcoming our witnesses and a special welcome to Mr. Ralston, who appears before us for the first time in his new role as Comptroller General. Thank you for coming today. My first question is for the Auditor General, and I'd first like to echo the praise that my colleague, Mr. Christopherson, has for you and for our system, and we are indeed very fortunate to be living in a country like Canada. Now, Madam Auditor General, you mentioned that for the 11th consecutive year, the government has received a clean audit opinion on its summary financial statements. Can you please comment on what this means, and how does Canada stack up against other countries?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say this is a very significant achievement. There are very few countries, if in fact any, first of all, there are very few countries that actually receive what we call a clean opinion. In many cases, the auditors have some difficulty in certifying the accounts. And as well, there are very few that have as long a history, if you will, of clean opinions. And that is why we really do believe that the Government of Canada is a leader internationally in its financial reporting. Especially since the government is doing its accounts on what we call the accrual basis, not the cash basis, which makes it even more difficult to do a lot of the estimations and to do a lot of the numbers that go into the accounts. So it is a very significant achievement.
Okay, thank you. My second question is also to you, Madam Auditor General. In the past, you have raised concerns about Treasury Board policy and how it relates to your office. You have stated in this committee that you have been working with Treasury Board to clarify these policies. And on September the 18th, the President of the Treasury Board wrote a letter to this committee regarding amendments to enhance the independence of agents of Parliament and to clarify respective roles and responsibilities. This appears to be a positive conclusion or outcome. Madam Fraser, are you pleased with the dialogue that you had with Treasury Board and the resulting changes?
Thank you, Chair. We are very pleased with the way that project was handled and the results. As I mentioned to committee and when we have the hearing on our report on plans and priorities, we will go into this perhaps in more detail. We had mentioned to the committee that there were a number of clauses or provisions in Treasury Board policies which applied to officers of Parliament which we felt were inappropriate. There was a review of those policies. Many of them have been corrected. I would add, though, that we are still not completely satisfied because the communications policy has yet to be addressed. But many of the other policies have been addressed, and we were very pleased with the progress that has been made.
Thank you. On page 2.34 of the public accounts, you mentioned that you are pleased to note that the public accounts includes a discussion about the economic stimulus commitments made during the fiscal year. Can you comment on this, since you did mention it in your observations, and can you also explain why you're pleased?
Thank you, Chair. As I note in my opening comments, most of the programs and initiatives that the government took under the Economic Action Plan would not have an effect in the year ended in March 2009. There is some disclosure in the statements, but the bulk of the transactions and the more significant transactions will occur in the current year. But given, I think, all of the attention that was being paid to the Economic Action Plan, we were very pleased to see that the government has made this disclosure and is giving Canadians some indication of the spending that will occur over the next 3 years. So that they understand how that is rolling out, if you will, and the fact that there is very little in the current in the statements for March 2009.
Thank you. My next question is for the Department of Finance, Mr. Rochon. We have heard repeatedly that Canada's fiscal position remains the best in the G7 and how this fiscal advantage will serve Canada well in the years ahead. And I understand that the IMF is projecting that Canada's total government net debt to GDP ratio will reach 28% this year. Can you compare that with our partners in the G7, the UK, the US, Germany, France, Japan, and Italy? Where do we stack up in the G7?
Well, we're currently we have the lowest net debt ratio by far in the G7. And as you indicated, the IMF projects that while our debt ratio will go up somewhat, it's in the order of 5 percentage points measured in relation to gross domestic product. That's really quite a small increase compared to the massive increases that are taking place in virtually every other G7 country. So it's perhaps small comfort that we're doing better in a relative sense because other countries are doing worse, but that is definitely the case.
And can you let us know, how does that look for the year 2014? What is the trajectory for Canada's net debt by that year?
Canada's net debt through 2014 will be only slightly higher than it is now. And again, what we're talking about here is the total government net debt. So it is the combined federal, provincial net debt plus the balances in the Canada and Quebec pension plans. It's calculated that way so that we can compare across countries, many of which are unitary states. And I'm going from memory, but my recollection is our net debt will be in the order of 34% of GDP on a total government basis in 2014 in Canada.
And how does that stack up against our partners in the G7?
Well, they would have net debt ratios that are considerably larger than ours. Just see. I don't have that data right off the top of my head, but
okay. Well, you've just mentioned that we're still going to be we're doing very well.
We're doing well, and we're well below anybody else.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Saxon. The clerk has just informed me that there is going to be a vote in the House on a procedural motion. So what I propose to do, we will just continue on until 5 minutes before the vote. We will probably adjourn. Oh, it's only one vote. At that time, we'll suspend for a 15-minute period, then continue the meeting after the suspension. So I just want to let you know that. We'll let you know how we're getting along time-wise. Okay, we can start round 2, 5 minutes. Ms. Crombie, 5 minutes.
Thank you and welcome to our guest, especially Mr. Ralston. I've got quite a number of questions, so just really short answers is fine. I do want to ask about the shift in our position because in 07-08 we did post a surplus, as we know, $9.6 billion. And then there was a $15.4 billion shift to find us. Now we find ourselves in a $5.8 billion deficit. So does that concern you? And what factors led to that? Because that was sort of pre-recessionary planning.
Right. Sure. Why don't I speak to that from the Department of Finance perspective? The deficit in large measure in 2008-9 reflects the onset of the recession. And you see that when you look at budgetary revenues, particularly the large drop in corporate income tax revenues. You recall that the global recession really accentuated in September of 2008, and the first quarter of the last quarter of 2008, and the first quarter of 2009, both Canada and other countries experienced very sharp declines in both output and incomes. And that fed through directly into our revenue base. Okay, thank you. And now that the accumulated deficit is upwards of $463 billion, and then we know that interest rates are starting to rise, what's the strategy to offset the increased cost of servicing the debt? Well, the debt service costs are projected to rise, in part because interest rates are historically low right now, but also because we are taking on more debt. In September, the government set out an update where it indicated an overall general approach to return to balance. and that approach was centered on controlling spending and reducing the overall growth rate in spending.
And Mr. Rochon, I wonder if you might help me understand this chart that you've given me based on our financial results and interest-bearing debt, because it seems to me that the unmatured debt here in 08-09 is $514 billion versus in 07-08 $390, a change of $123 million or 31.6%. What
Right.
does that mean specifically?
Well, the unmatured debt has gone up by $120 billion, but it is offset, and that is recorded in the government's liabilities. However, it is offset by a roughly commensurate increase in assets, and the reason for that is that the bulk of the increase in that unmatured debt is due to the purchase of mortgage-backed securities by the CMHC from the chartered banks in order to provide liquidity to our banks. One. Two, fairly large increase in liquidity for the Bank of Canada that was funded through an increase in unmatured debt. But this increase in the debt was used to purchase assets, financial assets in this case, so that the net debt, if you will, or the accumulated deficit shows a much smaller amount, a deficit of $5.8 billion.
And further down that chart, you seem to be reflecting a total pension and other liability increase of $5 billion. Is that a concern to you? That's almost a 3% increase as well.
I'm sorry,
The total pension and other liabilities is $5 billion.
Slide 10. Employee vet. Is this the employee vets? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Pension and other liabilities.
Right. Okay. So this is what I might describe as the, if you will, the natural increase in liabilities associated with public sector pensions and veterans, so-called current service costs of those plans.
Okay.
So each year, the government records in its accounts an increase to reflect the cost, effectively, of pensions of the people that are employed by the government.
In Volume 3, you're showing $9.4 billion spent on professional and special services in 08-09. And I reflect back to an earlier time in 04-05 when the spending was only $6.5 billion. So almost a $3 billion increase. That's 42% more. Where do these increases come from, and do they concern you on the amount that is being spent on professional and special services?
As I mentioned, although the amount appears as a single kind of line item on the consolidated financial statements, in point of fact, of course, the expenditures are made across the government in many different departments and in respect of many different programs. And in each case, it would be the managers of those programs that would need to decide what was an appropriate
But the increases
amount.
should be concerning. I note, too, that $586 million were spent on consultants. CRA spent $155 million on consultants. The Environment spent $31 million on consultants. Foreign Affairs, $20 million on management consultants. Health, $42 million. HRSD 82, it goes on and on. Public Works 178 million on management services. Are these not large numbers that concern you?
Well, they're
amounts
large
spent
numbers,
on
but it's not. There's not really any particular reason to be concerned with that business input as opposed to any other business input, just because of its nature. You would really have to look at the results that were obtained from those expenditures. They may very well have been the best way to get value for money. It would have been a programming decision, and you can't really conclude on the basis of the nature of the input itself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Palmer. Mr. Cramp, 5 minutes.
And it should maybe come as no surprise, but I actually have a question on accrual accounting that I'd like to ask both Madam Fraser and our Comptroller General. But before I get to that question, I also have another question of Madam Auditor General with regard to the integrated relocation contract. This is an issue that has went right back when the chair and Mr. Christofferson and myself originally sat, and I can remember the A. LePage, the envoy, the whole thing. And we went on and we spent a lot of time on it. It subsequently went to government operations. The same process went on over there. It is now, of course, before the courts, and quite thankfully, the recommendations came from our committees suggesting that there had been potentially some improprieties, and so it would be looked at. And it's now in the course of legal action. But what concerns me now, of course, is that we now have a new contract that was established under the Fairness Monitor and the recommendations of the Auditor General and of the committee. And of course, in this, only one company made a bid, and the one company that did not make a bid, but of course that is involved in the action right now, is Envoy. And there were no complaints about the process due to obviously the inclusion of the Fairness Monitor. Now, the company, the one company that put the bid in, Brookfield Relocation, won the bid. And obviously, they were under the impression that they had a healthy competition because the bid came in 15% less than what had happened before. So we're happy with that. But now that the contract has been awarded, we have some difficulty because we have a lobbyist on the Hill, and I'm not shy in stating it was Mr. Boudria, who is acting on behalf of Envoy. But he's been lobbying opposition members, government members, whomever, that's his job, that's his duty, to ask that the contract be extended on the original one. Now, they have a civil action going against the original company, and yet he wants to extend that contract. Of course, we have a circumstance here that if an award is made to that contract, and then subsequently that contract is renewed without going to tender, then of course there could be civil damages extended to extending the contract without giving advice. So, Madam Auditor General, this really disturbs me because then of course Mr. Boudria's client would get even more compensation naturally as a result of the legal action if they're allowed to extend the contract rather than accepting the process that we have now with, under the consideration of the Fairness Monitor, a new contract that's already been allotted. So I'm wondering, do you find that this is something that should consume the committee again? Quite frankly, of course, because we now have a motion before this committee on behalf of the opposition, and honestly, I'm a little bit surprised at the NDP bloc presenting this motion before the committee to go back in now and suggest that this tender should not be valid, should potentially be opened up, and going back to the original. So, do you really believe that lobbyists such as Don Boudria and that, they're really trying to derail the fair and open process, should that be something we should be looking back into again?
Mr. Chair, all I'm aware of in this is that the committee passed a motion asking us to review the relocation contracts and processes from 1999 to date. I have replied to the committee that we will do some preliminary inquiries. I don't know if you've received the letter, but we will do some preliminary inquiries and we will inform the committee within the next couple of weeks as to whether we will undertake an audit or not.
Well, thank you, because the timing is obviously very, very important, and this is time sensitive in that if we have a contract that will be allowed to be extended rather than allocated, and then there's a civil judgment, and that civil judgment then goes through to the extension, in essence, we as a committee and have been aiding and abetting the remuneration of a civil action. So I just have some deep concerns with that. Anyways, going back to the accrual accounting situation, if I may, we've all been a proponent.
You only have 7 seconds left. You're running pretty quick.
Let's do that.
Oh, okay.
We'll allow you the question. Go ahead.
Okay, very, very quickly then. We've all been a proponent, and it's worked relatively well, yet there apparently appear to be some difficulties with the application, particularly from the elected representatives in Australia. Can the Comptroller General comment, and perhaps even the Auditor General too, on some of the difficulties, and could we expect the same here?
Well, a number of countries have had experience with it. We've been read with interest a report put out by the OECD in which it's indicated that I guess you might say there are mixed reviews with respect to accrual, specifically the use of accrual appropriations. I just recently received a report from the CICA in Canada. It cites that same OECD report and basically gives a bit of, on the one hand, on the other hand, there are many purported benefits, but on the other hand, the experience has been that in some cases the results have not necessarily matched expectations. So the conclusion, it seems to be, is that any government that wants to go down that road should be very thoughtful and consider the particular circumstances and the manner in which implementation is made. I think the OECD, for example, talks about there might be instances where only certain types of expenditure might be subject to accrual appropriations, and modified cash might be used in other situations. For our part, my colleagues in the Treasury Board Secretariat have been looking at a pilot to basically not as a precursor to perhaps an eventual move towards accrual appropriations, to first look at the kind of restating, I guess, the cash basis appropriations that we now have, and to in that way produce kind of a pro forma presentation that might facilitate at least one element of the benefits, that is greater comparability down the line when the financial results become available. So for example, we would like to see whether that in fact helps, that once when in the future financial statements, accrual basis financial statements can be compared to these pro forma appropriations, maybe that will address some of elected members' concerns. So it is a matter that we're taking measures on, and we are studying, and we're attentive to the experience of other countries, but we have yet to conclude.
Okay, I believe the auditor has a comment.
Could I just add, Chair? I am aware that let's just say accrual appropriations may not have the same enthusiasm in Australia that it once had. But I would remind members, certainly members that were on the committee that did the study, that there are many provinces in Canada that have been using it now for several years, and there was testimony given that they felt it was actually very beneficial. So I think it would be important to have a broader view than simply looking at the Australia experience.
Point of privilege, Mr.
Yeah, just a real brief, just to be very, very clear. Mr. Cramp left the impression, actually all but said, that we were aiding and abetting, and he was surprised. And then hang on, Darrell, I listened to you. And I'll listen again if you want to take the floor again. But it was corrected by the Auditor General. I just want to underscore the correction that Mr. Cramp was inaccurate in his recollection of our motion. What we did was send new information to the Auditor General and asked her whether, in her opinion, that new information then warranted this to be looked at. The impression was clearly left, Mr. Cramp, that somehow you were shocked at the Bloc and the NDP, myself, were somehow willing to help a liberal who's now a lobbyist. And, you know, that's a pretty strong allegation, and that's not the case. So.
Okay, if I may, and I was going to make a statement too, Mr. Christopherson. I'll just read the last part of the motion, and that the committee asked the Auditor General to conduct an audit of the integrated relocation program as of April 1999, including the tendering and awarding of the 2009 contract, and to present our findings to Parliament. And as I pointed out when this motion came before the committee, we do not have control over the Auditor General's workload or her agenda. All we can do is make a motion. She has her office's own methodologies on risk and what she will audit and what she won't audit. All that was a recommendation, nothing more. We weren't going to extend contracts or disallow contracts. It would be a performance audit on the actual awarding of that contract. That's certainly my interpretation of the motion. And again, that's entirely up to her office as to the next step. And she did indicate she's going to get back to us. Am I correct, Madam Auditor?
Not only, might I just note that this was not a unanimous request from the committee, simply for the simple reason being, certainly no ill intent, but a recognition that, quite frankly, I and a number of the government members felt that this could open up a liability possibly down the road to the government that really we've looked at again and again and again.
Okay, colleagues, it's 31 minutes after 4 right now. We're down to probably 7 or 8 minutes before the vote. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to suspend this meeting. The meeting will reconvene at the end of the vote, and I'd ask every member to come back immediately after the vote. We should be gone probably in the vicinity of 20 minutes, so the meeting will be suspended for approximately 20 minutes, and we apologize for the inconvenience to the witness. Okay, we have 7 people here, so we'll start back. And right now, Mr. Paye, 5 minutes.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be sharing my time, if I have any left. In the document that you distributed to us, public accounts on page 5, you say that the accumulated deficit is $447 billion, 63 rather. From what I've been able to understand of the explanations relating to this from the Department of Revenue, there has been a fairly significant increase in the deficit for the coming years. Are you expecting that in the short term we will be exceeding the summit of 1996-97, the record of 96-97? There is a reduction of approximately $100 billion in the debt. There was a reduction over the past 10 years. The government expects that there will be a deficit of $56 billion for the present fiscal year and $44 billion for the coming year. And deficits will then be smaller, are expected to decrease over the medium term. In absolute terms, the deficit that the government will be incurring in the coming years will be greater than the reduction of the debt over the past 10 years, but that in itself may be rather deceptive, since we are making a comparison here between an economy that is almost twice as large as it was in the past. You're referring to the GIP. Do we know what this debt is due to? Do you have any percentage explaining, for example, I notice in Quebec, half of the debt is to Quebecers. Do you have to whom this debt is owed? The debt of the Government of Canada was issued mainly in denominated in Canadian dollars, but debt is also in international markets, and approximately 75% of this debt is held by foreigners at the present time. In other words, 25% is held by Canadians, yes. One last question before I turn my time over to my colleague. On page 8, you refer to the child benefits for 2008, 2009, similar to the present year. Is it because there was a reorientation in the program for this child benefit? Is it because there's a reduction in the number of children? How is it that the amount has been the same for 2 years running? That's a good question. There's been increases everywhere else in percentage terms. Even in some cases, though it's quite small, but this hasn't been the same. The children's benefits, 11.9 is correct for both years, yes. These are benefits that are paid through the tax system, and there's the Canada Child Benefit. There's a specific benefit whose amount is set at it is quite strange that the figure would be exactly the same for 2 years as in this year as in the previous year. In the estimate for September, the children's benefits are expected to increase by 11.9%. Last year, $12.2 billion this year.
Okay, just to follow up on that, do you think you need more time to give a more elaborate answer to that last question? Can you?
I think we just need to verify that the 11.9 for 8.9 is correct.
Wait,
it is correct. Okay.
They're correct. It's, the numbers in the presentation are rounded, so it's not the exact same number, but when you round, they both work out to 11.9. Okay, they are correct.
Okay, merci, Mr. Paillet. Mr. Shipley, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you, witnesses. I just want to follow up just a little bit on the comment, Mr. Ralston, I think, and also it might go to Mr. Rochon. The accumulated debt, 463 billion, decreased by 100 billion, say, to its peak of 562.9 in 1996 to 97. Your indication is that we have an accumulated debt of 56 this year, maybe 44, and then last in the coming year, which may take us back. Thankfully, I think Canadians know, I know that, appreciate that actually 40 billion was paid off prior to this happening, which the crunch, I think you said in March. Do you know, when was the last recession of this magnitude? There's a lot of questions about where did the money go. I'm sorry, when we look at a global recession that we're in right now, can you remember in terms of either one of you when we were in a global recession of the magnitude that we're in now?
The last recession, well, in terms of global recessions, this is the largest global recession since World War II, since the system's national accounts were developed, and you'd have to go back to the Great Depression. And this isn't anywhere close to the Great Depression, but that would be the next most important event globally.
Yeah. What were the numbers in terms of the stimulus package in total that you might be able to help us with that have been committed to stimulating the economy? I'm wondering if you would have that number for us.
Sure. The total value of the government stimulus package over the 2 years, 2009-10 to 10-11, is $46.5 billion. When combined with monies from provinces that are there to be partnered with federal programs, the total is $61 billion over the 2 fiscal years.
And I think that helps in terms of the net numbers that we're talking about, because one of the things that I wasn't picking up out of this in terms of, and I suspect it doesn't lay out sort of the equalization that happened with the provinces. I think that was 23 billion. They're rebuilding the military, the provincial equalization, and the download of the health. That actually we've continued to improve the health. So I'm trying to get a full picture when the question is asked, you know where the money has gone? It has, I think, likely a combination of those areas. And I think the biggest part is respecting that we're in a global recession unseen since the Great Depression of '33. And when I look at our debt ratio to GDP, as has been mentioned before, I think we're pretty fortunate to be in Canada. And for what our banks and what governments in the past and, in fact, of the time now are doing and have put us in a strong place. What I'm wondering, though, when I look at, there's been a change. When I looked at the numbers, you talked about the lack of revenues corporate, and then actually it seemed to be there was an increase in the tax on personal. Just where I have that. Has there been a change in the methodology? Because it just doesn't seem to ring that there would be an increase in the taxes that would come from personal. They've dropped on the corporate side. Has there been a change in the methodology in terms of determining personal tax?
There's been no change in the methodology. Well, there have been some improvements, you're right. Go ahead, Bill.
You may recall that in previous years, the Auditor General has observed that we could improve our methodologies for estimating tax revenues. So we've continued to do that, and one of the changes that we've implemented in the last fiscal year resulted in sort of a catch-up adjustment on personal taxes. So that's some of the reason that you saw the increase in personal tax.
Okay. Just a clarification, and actually it came up, and this will be my last question right for now, is we talk about the losses in public money, and I think when we see that, it always raises, the flags go up. those, and you talked about, give me an example of what I think you did. You talked about there'd be losses. Would those be like computer losses or losses that go out of the department? Is that what those are? What other countries disclose that, and how long have we been doing it? Are we the only country? Are we just tracking what every other country does, or is this something that's unique to Canada? Do you know?
I haven't done an official survey, but I do chat with my colleagues from other countries, and I can tell you our Australian colleagues think we're crazy to disclose this amount of information. So I haven't done comparison across the board, but to my knowledge, no other country sort of matches us on this level of disclosure. I'm not sure if you're aware of others. No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shipley. Mr. Christopherson, 5 minutes.
Chair. Volume 3, page 8.4, under Parks Canada Agency, and we're now into payments of claims against the Crown. And there's a number that stands out like a sore thumb, and I'm wondering if somebody can help me with it. It's $1,661,718, a claim against the Crown for contravened lease agreement. And that number is way at almost every other number around the page is 2,000, 8,000, one's 13, but nothing like this, 1.6 million. How did we lose $1.6 million in a lease agreement?
I could tell you in this section we disclose claims that are judgments, but I'm not familiar with the details on this one. You'd have to follow up with the actual department that's responsible for this one to get details on that.
I thought you might. I appreciate that. I understand you can't defend every line, but it stands out so big, and I already got a sense that you've gone through and looked for areas you thought you might get questions. I'm a little surprised, but I accept that. Moving on then. Same volume, page 2.25, under the heading of losses of public property due to an offense or other illegal act. And I'm sorry, page 2.24. I have one on 2. But the one I want to get to is, and it's under fisheries and oceans, and it's theft of computer equipment, as you said, but the number is so big compared to everyone else. The 26 cases of computer equipment, and lest anyone think that includes everything, the next line is theft of electronic equipment, which is an even bigger number, 63,000. And almost all the other departments, there are some, and I accept that there's going to be these things. But again, this number is so out of whack. Do we have a reason why? And I wouldn't have thought that ministry of all of them, but I'm listening.
What you'll find is that the departments that have are regionalized with many small operations are more susceptible to this sort of fraud. It's not like you have one building with commissionaires guarding the entrance. So in this case, you've got a fairly widely distributed organization with many access points, and that's typically the type of organization you'll see with more losses than others.
Yeah? Year over year?
Not always fisheries, but it's those organizations that are regionalized. If you compare them to something like the Department of Finance or TBS, where we're all largely in the same building, you'll see the losses are less than these departments where there's many regional centers.
Okay, I'll follow up on that. Thank you. Assuming you have time, I'll jump to the third one, 2.19. Just back a couple of pages, if you would. Losses of public money due to an offense, illegal act, or accident, foreign affairs, CEDA, middle of the page. False or fraudulent claims for grants and contributions. 5 cases, 2.991, almost $3 million, and all but $500,000 of it is gone. Again, any idea what the issue is here?
In this case, these were uncovered, I believe, as part of an internal audit. It's basically an audit of claims claimed under the agreement, and they'll go through and they'll audit the claims that are made and make sure the expenses are in accordance with the agreement. And I'm going from my memory here, but they found 5 cases where there was significant issues with the claims made, and I have not got an answer on why they don't think these items are recoverable. Typically, it's because the organization no longer exists or is no longer solvent, is often the reason.
That's a big chunk of money. Do these, Madam Auditor, do these come by you in any other particular, I know you find these things when you do your reviews. Are there any other ways that things that jump out come to you by exception? Like, would this cross your desk at all?
The only way it would cross our desk is if it was the result of an internal audit, for example. We are aware of internal audit reports, or if it was something really significant, generally the departments will advise us of these kinds of cases.
Well, I might want to do a little follow-up. I don't have a lot of time, Chair. One of the things I wanted to do, though, was to ask if you would be kind enough to put on the next agenda of the steering committee a review of the policy vis-a-vis the tabling of these documents, just going back to the $40 million error. And I accept that it was an error. What I have problems with was it was known before we sat here and met. This is where the rubber hits the road. There really needs to be some notification that, hey, folks, there are some problems in there. And if you could just have us discuss that at the steering committee, I'd appreciate it very much.
We'll put it on tomorrow's
Thank you, Chair.
agenda, Mr. Christopherson.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Christopherson. Mr. Weston, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I think that as members of this committee, we're all sort of somewhere between sensing, I forget who said the word, well, Mr. Christopherson, the word blessing of being in a country with the kind of record that you have outlined, a sense of gratitude for the people who work hard to keep it that way. And thirdly, maybe a question, and here is the question that I'd like to pose to the panel. What do we do with this in terms of attracting investment to Canada, encouraging people to do business here? What is the message you think we should be broadcasting as parliamentarians, particularly in this Paralympics year? What are you wishing that we would get that we're not getting when we travel or when we're interfacing with people from abroad? And I would put the question to you, Ms. Fraser, and to you, Ms. Chung, as well as Mr. Rochon, Mr. Matthews, if you've got thoughts on that. What should be in our press releases?
Well, Chair, I'm not sure I can respond to the question of investment in Canada because I think it goes far beyond the transparency of the public accounts and the accountability to a parliamentary committee. But certainly the fact that the Government of Canada produces these financial statements that receive clean audit opinions and gives this level of detail and transparency around our finances, I think is certainly a credit to the country and an indication of the accountability and transparency which exists here.
I don't think I have very much to add, and I think it's really the comparison when you leave Canada that you recognize how well regarded we are. I remember in one forum, and I don't remember where it was, but the French were complimenting themselves because they actually had a qualified opinion with 12 exceptions that year. So we, have a clean opinion for 11 years. That's quite a comparison, I would say.
Thank you.
I think a number of things. I guess I'd start in terms of investment by pointing out that we will soon have the lowest tax rate on new investment in this country of any G7 country. We'll have a tax rate that is, less than half of the current tax rate in the U.S. And well below the G7 or the OECD average, for that matter. And that's low levels of taxation in a context of a fiscal situation that's much, much better than in any other country. So if you're making an investment or contemplating an investment, you can do so in Canada without having to worry about the tax situation, for example, that the U.S. is now facing. Couple that with a very sustainable public pension system, high levels of highly educated workforce, and I think basically over the last 15 years, Canada has developed many of the attributes that one would want to have to attract investment and to be able to be competitive globally.
Thank you. Mr. Matthews?
Okay.
No? All right. Well, I'm going to share my time with my colleague, Mr. Kim.
Thank you, Madam Fraser. How many countries, I think there are 192 in any given time at the United Nations, but how many countries in the world could claim this high level of financial competence that Canada has reflected in these reports?
I would say probably 10 at most.
10? And are we on a scale within that 10 or just in the top 10?
Well, first of all, very few countries produce financial statements on the accrual basis of accounting, which is a much more complete and comprehensive accounting of assets and liabilities. Very few countries receive clean audit opinions. And so I would say, yeah, there probably would be at most 10. And I would say Canada has certainly been a leader for many years in financial reporting.
Thank you. Mr. Ralston, could you comment to the committee on how, I mean, we've seen in the province of Ontario how hiring consultants, not following the rules and getting no results can be a waste of money. But can you explain to the committee how hiring consultants can actually save the federal government money?
Well, what I would say is that hiring consultants can provide value for money. There are many, many cases where you need a specialized expertise for a short period of time, and it simply makes more sense to acquire as much of it as you need rather than to try and put someone on staff that permanently that may be underutilized. So that to me is kind of the prime example of when using a consultant is appropriate. Specialized expertise and something that's only and the service is only going to be required for a relatively short period of time.
Very much, Mr. Young. Mr. Weston, Ms. Crombie, 5 minutes, and you're going to be sharing your time, I understand.
That's correct. I just wanted to point out as well, thank you, that the amount that was spent on professional and special services, $9.4 billion, is almost twice that of what the deficit will be this year, $5.9 billion. So it is an inordinate large number. Now, on Volume 3, Ministers' Offices, if we could, 10.26 was the first one I looked at. And I thought it might be helpful as well, because to keep things in perspective, I don't know if you ever gave any consideration to doing the dollar amount, the variance, and the percent increase and decrease, which would have made it useful. But $59 billion on ministers' offices. Oh, sorry, excuse me, I meant million. $59 million on offices. Is that an increase or a decrease? Well, hey, it's only 3-0. An increase or decrease over the previous fiscal year?
I'm not certain. We haven't presented these on a comparative basis. As you may remember, this comes from a commitment made under the Federal Accountability Act to produce these on an annual basis. But we'd have to check last year's public accounts to see what the change is. In terms of providing a comparison, we thought about that, but we didn't do that simply because ministers' portfolios often change, and tracking comparatives, it makes it very difficult in that situation. So we've just decided to do year over year. Where there has been a change in minister throughout the year, you will see a split though between the two ministers to see what they.
I did see that. Thank you. That was useful. I was very interested who the large spenders were. And of course, Minister of Finance, I almost predicted, and then of course National Defense, because there would have been travel. Natural Resources at $2.2 million seemed high, but then when I got to the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food, that number seemed inordinately high for agriculture, $2.2 million. Is there a reason why the Ministry of Agriculture's office would spend that amount of money? There wouldn't be any foreign travel, I wouldn't think.
Again, I think this is a situation where the question would best be posed to the organization.
Okay.
Can I just add that you will see some that may surprise you in their size, where there's a minister who has regional responsibilities included in that. So if they've got, I believe, the agriculture, they've got the Canadian Wheat Board as well. So you may see increased travel because of that, but I'm speculating on that front.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I still wouldn't think that would warrant that ministry to be in fourth position. But yet again, $10 million, $10.5 million spent on foreign junkets and conferences. Is this an increase or decrease from the previous year?
Again, I'm not certain. We have to check last year's public accounts. We don't do that on a comparative basis.
In various places, you also reference proceeds from the disposal of surplus Crown assets. Is it possible for you to provide a list of what sorts of Crown assets have been disposed of, what and which assets and by which departments?
I can tell you that most Crown asset disposals are run through the Department of Public Works. So there's the process to go through and dispose of those. Typically, it relates to small dollar equipment type things, but they don't just get rid of those. They do try and auction them off or sell them. So it's many small items, but I don't have details on which ones. But the Department of Public Works does actually run that process.
Because the aggregate total, the cumulative total may be quite large as well. Public appointments and commissions, I noticed that $689,000 lapsed. Whatever happened to the Public Appointments Commissioner? And why did that money lapse? 21.7.
I can't answer what happened to the Public Appointments Commissioner, but I can tell you that the report of this is the actuals versus the appropriation, and that's what was reported, but I can't give you any details on what happened to that office.
Public safety and emergency preparedness. This is very salient for us because we've just reviewed the report, and the Auditor General made some rather astounding findings that we were not prepared for a national emergency, yet $384 million lapsed. Why would this be?
Again, I think these questions are just going to have to be posed to the organizations.
I'm going to give some time to Mr. Lee as well.
Mr. Lee, you have time for one question.
Yeah, I have one question.
Take your best question.
Take your time, Mr. Lee. Yeah. No. Finance Department. There was an amount planned to be spent for Public-Private Partnerships Canada, the 3P initiative. And it looks like it never got off the ground, and there was about $92.6 million allocated but unspent. None of it, I don't think any of it got spent. 95% of it got spent. Why didn't that get off the ground, particularly in a year when we were trying to get infrastructure built? Because that's what that agency, that's what that initiative was targeted at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the office is up and running now, and that I would submit is related to infrastructure will be longer term in nature. It's not the kind of infrastructure that would be necessarily amenable to stimulus spending.
Well, there's nothing like the present to get the thing going. I mean, if we're looking at long run, why wait a year?
And as I said,
what was the obstacle? Was it maybe it was the crush of the need to get shorter term investments out the front door? But
yeah, I can't speak to that specific file other than to tell you that the office is up and running now. I could provide the committee with the chair with a note as to what the nature of the delay was, if that would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you, Mr. Lee. Thank you, Ms. Crombie. Mr. Young, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. For Mr. Ralston, please. Despite the worldwide recession and our economic action plan, we're spending really an unprecedented amount of money in a short period of time. But the ratio of deficit to GDP still went down 0.9% last year. What does that reflect?
Well, I think Mr. Rochon spoke to this a little bit earlier.
Go ahead.
Obviously, against a trend of growing GDP and a growing and in the long term growing economy, we've been successful in keeping a tight grip on government spending, and the manner in which it has been financed has been prudent.
I think what you'll find is the full impacts of the recession will be felt in the current and the upcoming year, and that in part the fact that the deficit was reasonably small in 2008-9 is a reflection of the timing of the recession, that it took place in the latter part of the year. Having said that, the deficit GDP ratios that the federal government and Canada writ large will incur are much smaller than is occurring in other countries.
Thank you.
And again, we thank all of you for being here today. It's been an extremely interesting session, I think, and you've given us some hopeful news in terms of our jobs and working with our international counterparts. I'd like to return to that international theme and consider us your advertisers for our fellow countrymen and countrywomen. And in the next 100 days, we're going to have people from all over the world coming to our country, certainly to British Columbia and to Vancouver Whistler. If you're sitting with them, imagine counterparts from other countries, business people. What would be some best practices that we could talk about in terms of our accounting and financial system that creates this transparency? And maybe we can start with you, Mr. Rochon, and Madam Fraser, and then anyone else who wants to chip in on that. Let me just say, someone famous once said, the 20th century was going to be, belong to Canada. Someone famous said that. Anyway, if it had been a conservative, he would have said the 21st century. He would have been right up to date. Please go ahead.
Well, maybe what I could just simply review is the Government of Canada's reporting practices in financial matters. We normally table a budget in the early spring, in the February-March period. Over the course of the year, the Department of Finance issues monthly fiscal monitors, so each month the government reports on the revenues and expenses in the month that ended roughly 6 weeks prior. In the fall of each year, the government provides a medium-term view of the fiscal situation, normally over the next 5 years. That is followed by, or preceded normally by the public accounts and the annual financial report, which report on the outcome for the year that ended March 31st.
What I'd like to point out is the purpose of this meeting, of course, has been to review the government's financial statements. It kind of points us to the pinnacle, the end of the road, one of the most visible outputs, perhaps, of the government's financial management system. But one of the things that I think deserves mention is and one of the things that my office is particularly responsible for is nurturing a strong community of strong financial professionals, strong internal audit professionals that work around the year in all of the departments and agencies, applying sound policies, sound principles, a lot of due diligence, and it's really a lot of the efforts of those kinds of professionals that produce this, and to support them, my office has through the Treasury Board has issued some important policies on financial management governance, on internal control, and on internal audit, and I believe that framework is fundamental to the continued health and the continued good results that we see, and the not just clean opinions, but also actually sound spending.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Weston. I just have a question, perhaps to Ms. Fraser and perhaps to Mr. Ralston. That's regarding the changes that you found in the CRA methodology in projecting corporate and personal income taxes. It seems to me, this goes back 10 years, that we've had difficulties in projecting the actual end-of-year surplus or deficit. And if you went back 7 or 8 years ago, the surpluses seemed to be coming higher than what the Department of Finance were thinking at the time, right up until year-end. And then now I'm not so sure we're into the opposite regime, that they're coming in perhaps lower than what finance is projecting. And when you analyze it and you talk to people, a lot of the blame is put on the projections that come from CRA. The government probably has a pretty good idea what the expenses are going to be, especially at year-end and on March 31st. But when they publish the financial statements in September, the surplus is higher. It may not be substantial, but when you're talking 8 or 9 million, it's a lot of money in my circles. So, Ms. Fraser, do you think that the the new methodology will correct this problem, or do you still have a concern as to the numbers that are being projected by finance?
Chair, we had concerns over the revenue numbers in two aspects. One was that the estimates were actually underestimating the revenue. Yes. When we would go and actually look at actual assessments and collections later, they were higher. There have been a number of modifications that have been made in the last year, but quite frankly, only time will tell when we actually get the assessments as to how much closer that assessment is. I would say, though, from year to year, the difference sort of in the opening and closing balances were never really a lot different, so the revenues within the year were fairly close. It's when we compared it to the assessments, there was always this difference that seemed to be going on. So we are hopeful that some of the adjustments that have been made in the current year will make it better. The other area where we had expressed some concerns in the past was the methodology for determining the allowance for doubtful accounts on the taxes receivable. And again, there have been a number of improvements made this year. And you can understand that with the recession, we were quite concerned that maybe the methodology, because it's based on past experience, may not reflect all of the potential losses. And we went in and looked at actually specific sectors and did much more rigorous testing and are comfortable with the allowance now. We have indicated, though, to the Revenue Agency that we think it important that they continue to track this through the recession to see if the methodology and the model that has been developed will stand up going forward.
Okay, Mr. Ralston, do you want to comment on the methodology? Are you satisfied that we will be getting accurate numbers going forward?
Well, I've had an intimate relationship with those numbers for the past decade. Let me just say that on the estimate of the revenues themselves, what we're experiencing is I think a growth in understanding that comes with experience. I think when we first embarked on the estimation process with accrual accounting for tax revenues about 6 years ago, I guess it was, we actually placed a high value on being able to tie the estimates to actual transactions. And effectively what we tried to do was look at the experience subsequent to the year end to get a good fix on what was the reality that had been as of the financial statement date. And that was a deliberate choice, and I think, frankly, that was a choice that was welcomed by the Office of the Auditor General at the time. But as we began to understand our methodology and understand some of its kind of systematic biases, we've corrected those over time, and we're always willing to make the corrections. We make the corrections, however, once we're in a position where we're confident that any change we make will be a change for the better. So that process will continue. So I expect that we will continue to improve. With respect to the accounts receivable, the allowance for doubtful account methodology, it took a strong act of will last year to change the methodology from what was happening in the past to what is we're going to be doing going forward. We certainly believed at the time that that change was fundamental and very valuable, and I think it's obviously early days to declare it a success, but I think so far it's holding up, and frankly we will follow the same process that I just described, which is to continue to monitor, and we will not hesitate in making changes that are required to improve it if it becomes evident that that's necessary.
On that issue, Mr. Rochon, we seem to be a moving target on the deficit. It wasn't that long ago that it was your department was announcing as a surplus, and it went to a $32 billion deficit. Now it's at 56. In October, the fiscal year ends March 31st, 10. Do you, and again, I think you have a pretty good grasp on expenses, although there is some fluctuation, especially with employment insurance and other variables that have to do with the recession. So it really comes down, the big variable would come down to the methodology, and that comes, of course, a lot of the information coming from CRA. Are you satisfied with the information you're getting? Are you satisfied with the methodology? And I guess most importantly, are you satisfied with that $56 billion figure that's being published now?
Well, we're definitely satisfied with the information we're getting from CRA. I think there's been a tremendous improvement over the last several years. There's always, one should not stop making improvements. However, both the methodological changes that have been put in place, as well as the frequency and timeliness of frequency and quality of the data that we get from the agency have improved tremendously. I guess in terms of the projections of the department, I think what one needs to bear in mind is just the underlying volatility out there in the economy. Going to your point of the revision in the deficit for the year that's underway, that was, half of that revision was due to, not quite half, almost half was due to greater expenses related to the auto sector, and the other half, roughly, was due to just the deterioration, and the further deterioration in the economy vis-a-vis what we expected at the time of the 2009 budget. And I'd give you just one number by way of example. In 2007-8, corporate income tax revenues were $40.6 billion. We're projecting them to be $23.8 billion in 2009-10. That's a tremendous volatility, and it's one that that we've got to deal with. And so, yeah, we'll forecast as best we can, as do others. But the amount of uncertainty that's out there is still tremendously high. It's not going away. We provide the best projections we can, but I don't think one should underestimate just how difficult it is to come down on a point estimate when one has roughly $500 billion in combined expenses and revenues. And for me, that's the biggest issue.
Yeah, it is after 5:30, and we like to conclude these meetings on time. Before I ask for closing remarks, I just want to repeat some of the comments that were made earlier. We have, Canada is blessed with a very sound financial accounting system. Our level of transparency, openness, getting the accounts out on time, and adhering to public sector accounting principles, I think is second to none from when you compare it to international standards. So on behalf of the members of Parliament, certainly we want to thank all the effort that goes into preparing these financial statements. You do a great job on behalf of us all. So I want to, before we do conclude, I want to ask any of the witnesses if they've got any final concluding remarks for us. And once we receive the concluding remarks, I will adjourn the meeting. Ms. Fraser, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank the committee for their interest in the public accounts. As I said, I think it is a really critical accountability document. And I appreciate that there was this hearing on the accounts and on our audit of the accounts. So thank you.
Mr. Ralston, we worked too hard on you in your first appearance here. Any concluding comments?
Well, you weren't too easy on me either. But in any event, actually what I would like to do is just reiterate the comments that you made at the beginning. This is the end of a cycle. It starts with budgets and goes through main estimates and hearings around main estimates and hearings around supplementary estimates, and then we see the final results. And it is the whole process that is important, and the scrutiny that parliamentarians provide is fundamental to the success of the whole enterprise. So I thank you.
Mr. Matthews, anything to add? Madame Guignan? Mr. Rochon?
Well, I would just like to thank the committee for your interest and the team, actually. The public accounts is a the product of a lot of work across a number of departments, all departments, but primarily the central departments of the Receiver General, the Treasury Board Secretariat, the Controller General, the Auditor General, and from time to time the Department of Finance. And it's a very professional relationship. We sort out our differences, and we do it in a very professional way. And we, for 11 years have come to an agreement, and that's an achievement, and I want to thank particularly my colleagues for that.
Okay, again, I want to thank you for your appearance here, and the meeting is adjourned.